Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's so nice to see everyone today. Welcome to the Forum, a weekly program for the Columbus Metro Club. I'm Sophia Pfiffner. I'm the president and CEO of the Columbus Metro Club. And for those of you who are joining us via our live stream, we're coming to you from the Ellis, an Italian village, and we're so thankful today for your participation. We're also thankful for the sponsors for today's forum, which is The Ohio State University and Improving. So we'd also like to thank our live stream partners as well, because we wouldn't be able to broadcast to the folks all over Central Ohio, but honestly all over the world. So thank you so much to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and our live stream promotional partnership, which is the Columbus Dispatch. All right, so let's give them a round of applause before we get everything going. All right, so welcome to Central Ohio's AI revolution. Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping Central Ohio's jobs and industries at light speed. There are so many questions, including whether we can ensure AI doesn't widen the existing economic and racial disparities. And with a panel of experts, we'll unpack how AI is impacting Central Ohio today, but most importantly, tomorrow. To introduce today's wonderful panelists, please welcome to the podium Ravi Belakunda with today's sponsor, The Ohio State University. Ravi, the podium is all yours.
Thank you, Sophia. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to sponsor a topic as important as it is. I'm Ravi Belakunda. I'm the Chief Academic Officer, the Provost at Ohio State. And I'll just say a couple of words about why we would like this conversation, and I'm delighted that we're having this together. There is a revolution happening in AI, and we'll hear from our panelists from their perspectives. And at Ohio State, we bring significant heft, commitment, and strength to this area. We have 2 nationally funded large centers in AI that we lead. We are not part of a group. We lead those. One in Edge AI, having to do with next generation wireless, 6G and beyond, and what AI could do to those. And the other on cyber infrastructure called Icicle. So 2 nationally funded centers. And you may have heard we just made a commitment that every graduating student entering Ohio State this fall is going to be bilingual, will be fluent in AI and the application of AI to their field of study, from history to literature to everything else. So we're all in, and this region is poised to really, really become a leader in this space, and I'm looking forward to our panelists discussing that. So my pleasure to introduce Mike Cohn, Vice President of Network Operations at Cover My Meds, Nathan Craig, one of our own, Buckeye, Associate Professor of Operations and Business Analytics at the Ohio State's Fisher College of Business, Nicole Jackson, Principal AI Consultant and AI Practice Lead for Optimum Technology, and Guru Vasudeva, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Property and Casualty with Nationwide. And our host for CMC today, another Buckeye, John Hersovsky, Managing Director of Synexus Consulting. John, welcome back. Thank you for doing this. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, to set the stage, we couldn't find a better person to set the stage than a professor, an academic. So Nate is going to do that for us. And here's a couple questions that I want him to kind of talk through for a few minutes. So what exactly is artificial intelligence, and how is it different from just software or automation? It seems we're in a new era of AI, and we regularly hear terms like generative AI and AI agents. What is different about the current phase of AI? And if time permits, he'll talk a little bit about the learning that AI can do from humans, and is it a metaphor for reality? So, Nate, you're up.
Thank you so much, John. I had the pleasure of having John in class, and now he's calling on me, so I guess the tables have turned.
Yeah, and I'm not done yet, Nate. I'm calling on you more.
Oh, no. So to start with, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence? Very broadly, it's the field that takes software and machines and teaches them to do tasks that would typically require human intelligence, right? So this could be driving a car, reading a radiological scan, having a chat, making a security price forecast, and the list goes on and on. And so specifically to address the issue of how does that compare to software and automation, AI can be part of software or implemented in software, but it need not be. And AI is a tool that enables more automation. And I think, John, sort of embedded in that question is the notion of how does the AI we have now differ from traditional software and automation? So for a long time, AI was what we call rules-based. So if you've been around since the 80s, you might have heard the term expert systems. And the idea is we had to have people go in and specify rules for how to complete these tasks. So let's say we're doing a product recommender. We might say if the person is from this area of their country, they're in this age demographic and so on, we're going to recommend this particular product to them. The contrast that we have now is what's called machine learning. So the idea of machine learning is we take a whole bunch of data and we let large-scale algorithms like neural networks learn patterns, learn their own rules for accomplishing a given task. And that's driven a lot of the improvement in performance that we've seen over the recent decades. And that brings me to the next part of your question, John, which is, well, what's different now? It seems like something has changed recently in the AI landscape. What is driving that change? So just to quickly, I think you asked about two terms. One was generative AI and one is AI agents. Yep. So just to quickly define those, generative AI is any AI algorithm that outputs the same type of data it learned from. So ChatGPT learns from text. Technically, we call them tokens. They're words, parts of words, punctuation, and so on. And it outputs more text. That's in contrast with non-generative AI, like something that reads a radiological scan, right? So that takes in a scan, it outputs a diagnosis, right? So generative AI is simply, it creates the same type of data it learned from. An agent is something that can autonomously achieve a goal, right? So right now you can go on, for instance, ChatGPT agent or Claude computer use and give it a goal like, make me a reservation for a steakhouse in downtown Columbus for Friday night. And it'll use a variety of AI capabilities like machine vision to process what's going on in a browser, a language model to reason about how it should interact with the browser and so on in order to achieve its goal. And I think, there's consumer uses, but I think the enterprise uses of that will be really, really remarkable. So I think there's three things to keep in mind about what is different now. The first is we've seen a remarkable increase in our ability to process data at scale. So just to give you a sense, when I talked about ChatGPT's training, it's trained to predict the next token. That's how it actually converses with you. It just predicts one by one what it should say next on a data set of over 1 trillion tokens. If you were to try to read that start to finish, it would take you 12,000 years. You would have had to start reading before humans invented writing. What processing goes on behind that enable for it to learn its rules? Well, if you've ever been in a data center, you've seen cabinets. They're not much larger than I am. The current generation of NVIDIA cabinets can do a single multiplication or addition per second per grain of sand on the planet. And that's one cabinet. Data centers, of course, can have hundreds or thousands of them. So we're seeing an explosion in scale that's almost hard to reason about. What has that actually done for the algorithm perspective? What I think is going on is we're moving from a regime wherein AI was narrow. We could reason about it doing specific tasks, unlocking your phone, recommending a product, and so on. And I think this is the most important things for leaders to realize about what AI is about to do. It's moving from something that's narrow to something that's general. ChatGPT can write an email, it can code, it can help you with a business plan, it can write a children's story. In fact, we can't even enumerate all of the things the current AI systems can do because they're so broad. We're now in a regime where we have to explore. So if you take away kind of one thing at the high level, it would be we have a new what we call general purpose technology. This is my view on it. So things like electricity, computing, the internet, these are general purpose technologies that can be put to a wide variety of uses. And when those become available, one of the most important things leaders can do is encourage their organizations to take that opportunity to explore, how can this let us do what we're currently doing better? How can this enable us to do brand new things that we never imagined? The third and final thing to keep in mind is I hear a lot of anxiety around what it's going to do to the job market, what it's going to do to the economy. My thinking on that is we've already been in a prolonged period of integrating new general purpose technology. So the computer, the internet, I view this as an extension, an important extension, but an extension nonetheless. So we all have seen tremendous changes since the 90s in how we shop or consume media. This is told by the stories of Amazon and Blockbuster and Netflix and Sears and so on. So we've all lived through this. And in fact, economists find that 60% of the jobs Americans held in 2020 did not exist in 1940. So I think we are already well equipped through experience to deal with these changes, but I do think the pace of change will accelerate. Thank you.
Okay, we're done. In 5 minutes, you got it all. That's why Nate's on the, when we were asked to participate, Nate was top of my list because he gives a great explanation in layman's terms, really, of understanding how important this is and where it's going. Before we move on to the next section, any of my further panelists want to add on to what Nate just said? Thank you, Nate. They're good. They're like, we're good. Good on that one. Okay, great. Now, before we jump into some little bit more meatier topics, I wanted to give an opportunity for the panel to talk a little bit about personal use. Nate mentioned a couple items from our personal use or kind of everyday AI, how they use it. So this will go to all of you, and I'll expect to hear from all of you, is, how do you personally use AI in a surprising or useful way? And what's one AI tool or capability you think more people in Central Ohio should be using right now, but probably aren't? Whoever wants to jump in first, go ahead. Guru?
Sure.
Yep.
Thanks, John, for the opportunity. So how many of you have had the opportunity to use deep research? Raise your hand. That is definitely a tool I would highly recommend that you use it. Deep research is available both in ChatGPT and Gemini and many of the other tools out there. What it does is, the example that Nate talked about, reading lots of things. So when you ask ChatGPT a question, it gives you a simple, quick answer, right? And it does that from having already read a lot of stuff, right? Whereas if I have something unique questions, for example, in my job, I deal with a lot of different technologies. That's what I do at Nationwide. I get to meet with a lot of CEOs of different companies, startups, and so on. In the past, when I would meet with them, I would research their company, and I would research their competition so that I can be very intelligent in that conversation and also learn from that interaction. Now, what it used to take me maybe 2 hours to do that prep, if it's a really important meeting, now I can pretty much do a deep research prompt. And when I do that, I can say, I'm meeting with company XYZ, find out who their competition is, what is their market penetration, and tell me what are the pros and cons of which strengths and opportunities of these companies. And what the model does is it goes to all those websites and really then starts reading other articles that might be written in Gartner or other websites, and then really brings it all together and gives me the answers. And before that, it actually asked me a bunch of questions. This particular company, XYZ, has got multiple features. Which one are you most interested in? So it really is more like having your own intern that is at your disposal all the time. I use it not only for a day job, but I also use it like we're going to Thailand sometime this year. We have a big group of family that's going all the way from 17 years old to 83 years old. And we're all interested in history, religion, architecture, food, and I wanted to curate a very specific itinerary when we're in Bangkok. Can I read Lonely Planet? Yes. But I also want to read other things. I just don't have the time. So I gave a very specific task, and it took maybe 15, 18 minutes to go research all of these things, comes back with a very specific answer. So it's really powerful. If you've not played around with deep research, play around with it, it is just will blow your mind.
Nicole,
Sure.
thank you.
So
Guru.
I'll go. So I deal with a lot of complexity, meaning I focus very much on the governance side, focus on a lot of different legislative changes. And as an example, by April of 2025, there were 1,000 proposed new bills for AI. And that is almost impossible for a human to read through. So I began to actually play with the ChatGPT agentic model to first pull in all of the legislative changes and do some comparative analysis against what we know is occurring in different AI governance frameworks, as an example. And I wasn't necessarily looking for all the changes, I was looking for anomalies in the changes in the language. And so I think when you think about different ways that it can apply to your work, especially in spaces where you have high complexity, thinking about having an agentic tool go out for you and extracting the right information with the right context as you're giving it a goal that you're setting, and then thinking about how you would use it to do things like theme detection, things like anomaly detection, things that are required for you to understand the changes that are occurring in real time so that you're not reading 1,000 different bills. Those are really, really interesting ways that you can apply AI in a very useful way. And what I have found is that I am able to take more time extrapolating the complexity and less time trying to read through a lot of the repetitive jargon. And those are great ways for you all to do it. So like if you're a business leader, as an example, and you have like a visioning session or something similar, and you have transcriptions, you would use some of the tools and capabilities that we have, even with diving into more complex concepts, using agentic tools to understand industry trends, to pressure test if your vision is even aligned with where your market is going. Those are really interesting ways that you would use AI tools today, and that's how we're seeing some of the emergence of the usefulness in AI.
Fantastic. Mike, do you want to add one on? And then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, how do we use AI in our everyday lives? And I use it for everything, literally. If there's a use case that I think could help make my life easier, optimize, I use it. So that's anything from, like my oldest daughter is really into soccer. And when she has a tournament for a weekend, we want to maximize her eating schedule. Say, hey, now she's only 9, so just keep that in mind. She can eat ice cream and stuff, but how do we optimize her schedule so she has the best energy during 7 games in 2 days? Super interesting things. I think one that I found most fun maybe was about a year ago. I hate buying cars, but I was due to buy a car, and so I was like, well, we can have some fun with this. And if you're familiar with Chris Voss, who wrote the book Never Split the Difference, I said, hey, imagine you're Chris Voss, ex-FBI negotiator, negotiating with this dealership. I don't like to talk on the phone with this stuff. We're going to do all text messaging back and forth and emails. Help me negotiate this car purchase. And I will say, it kind of dominated the car dealership. But so you can use it for a lot of cool things. I think if you're a business leader in Central Ohio, I would say use it for decision-making support. I mean, if you want a second set of eyes to validate your decision, that might be a financial decision, or if you want to deploy capital or resources to something, leverage AI to be your co-pilot with that.
Excellent. Before we move on, actually, to the next question, it'll be for Nicole. I will give a quick example. One of our clients that we're working with right now, we're helping them through a procurement process for an implementation firm for the software they want to implement. And so we got all the proposals in, and one of the individuals on the proposal team from the client sent all the proposals through ChatGPT. And it was so funny because it actually came back with an answer or recommendation on who we should go with. We ended up going with a different firm than what the AI tool, but it was very helpful in helping us to think about things that we hadn't really thought about in a quick time frame. Okay, let's move on. So this next one is about jobs, skills, and the workforce. And I'm going to ask Nicole to kind of lead the conversation on this. So Nicole, from your perspective, what are the most surprising or exciting applications of AI in the business you're seeing now, in the business world? And which jobs in Central Ohio do you think are maybe at most risk from AI disruption? And which ones are emerging in their place?
Yeah, so, starting with some of the trends we're seeing, I always look at things from the perspective of a capability. And so going back to the previous example, we're seeing the deployment of solutions that are kind of hybrids of one another. Great example, I love the concept of a knowledge graph. And at a very high level, knowledge graph is a bunch of disparate information that we would not necessarily link together. Now we find using machine learning and other data science tools, the ability to connect disparate concepts together. I've seen this deployed actually in law enforcement, which is an area of specialization that we focus in, where we are looking at different anomalies to connect, like for an example, a cell phone number to a human being and a human being to a location. And we've seen this with like cracking cold cases as an example, things from running transcripts, right? That's an unstructured set of data through a knowledge graph that helps us understand the people, the circumstances, the situations, and processes that need to enable a solution. And I think that's super promising because I think we focus a lot on like the front-end solutions like chatbots, and that makes a lot of sense because they're commercially available. But in industry where we have silos and businesses and departments, where we have procedures and processes that need to be optimized, where we have disparate, unlocked information at an organizational level, when we are enabling ourselves through knowledge graphs, and even through knowledge graphs coupled with agentic tools or generative tools, where a generative tool will sit on top of it so that you can extract information from it. And an agentic tool understands quite literally the goal of the information to begin with. The emergence of those tools together, I think, have an ability to transform entire business operations. And to kind of answer your question on where I see businesses going, you'll see some businesses that exist that need to augment with artificial intelligence using those solutions. You'll see new emergent solutions coming through where you have like really niche and nimble startups that are AI first, agentic first, that are able to push and really challenge some of the things that we're building with that tooling. But the skill set question is an interesting one, and it's one that I think I would like to kind of step back and say, like, what does that mean? When we look at all of the roles today in industry, we understand that there are organizations that have no AI. If we did a quadrant, we have some organizations that have like AI light, or I would say the existing expert systems that you referenced earlier, where they're predictive tools but still reactive, right? Where we kind of understand that there's data with a relationship, but we're reacting to that. And then the third is this idea of like augmented with AI, or the co-pilot method, where we're using it in the flow of work, where we're using it to help us make decisions. And the fourth is agentic. And when we consider the role transformation, what we're actually looking at are organizations that are shifting human beings from no experience with AI, normally moving now into skipping the second section in some instances, and going into this co-piloted view. And that's interesting because that starts to challenge like the skill and ability of people who are now processing things with different cognitive load capabilities. They're attempting to augment themselves with different pieces of technology, and the readiness component becomes the key. And so, like, what are those skill sets that are required for the transformation? I think that when we're looking at what we're seeing in industry, we're actually experiencing a scenario where human beings are transforming how they're working with AI through different skills as like algorithmic thinking and systems thinking. Do we understand what the solution is trying to do? Do we understand the input and output from a solution? And so the skills that we're gonna require then, and the transformation from pressuring roles, will very much be about where the organization is and the types of augmentation we're going to experience. So the transformation from like the roles that we expect, those that are like very task-oriented and repetitive, you will see a transformation there. You'll see that in administrative roles, as an example. If we can summarize from transcription, we won't have the same need for those people to do that. But that does not mean that the role doesn't exist. It means the complexity of the role changes because the box that they moved into in a quadrant changes. And so that's what I think is probably the most important to emphasize. And the emergence of new roles will actually be that we have people who are navigating different forms of complexity. We will have different roles that transform because you're processing more information in a different way. Because now you need to think about governance in a way algorithmic thinking impacts the input and output of a system. Did you have the right amount of data? Was the data appropriate? Did you have the right governance framework? Those are the things.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone want to add to that? Guru?
Sure. So at Nationwide, when we think about as an insurance company, but highly dependent on technology, the killer app for us is actually in the programming space. I think programming is going to be completely transformed, coding, because it is so much faster you can do. I was actually talking to a founder here in the Columbus community. He has built many companies. He had a phenomenal exit like 15 years ago. Since then, he has built many more. And what he was sharing with me is that he has built an entire solution, just 2 people in the company, right? I think that's the kind of stuff that's all possible because everything in programming is already in some kind of a easy to search, digest information, and ChatGPT Copilot or GitHub Copilot, those things really can speed up. And the other areas where we are seeing is in underwriting. We do a lot of underwriting, complex insurance, and there we are beginning to really experiment how can we leverage generative AI to really make those things faster, better, more confident decisions.
Excellent. We're going to move on to the next question, but I will say this. So Guru just brought up a point. So I'm an Accenture alumni. I was with Accenture for a long time, and I was talking to one of their managing directors recently, and they have a huge workforce in offshore that does a lot of the coding. And he was telling me that they're expecting about 80% of that coding to be done by machines versus people by the end of this calendar year. Significant. I was blown away by it. Hopefully I'm not quoting something wrong thing, but I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he said, and it was pretty startling to me. Okay, Guru, back to you. Columbus as an AI hub, right? So some leaders envision Columbus becoming a global AI capital, right? What has to happen for that to become a reality? And then how would Columbus compare to like Silicon Valley when it comes to AI?
So I think Silicon Valley has a unique advantage, and they are in the leading edge of really creating the tools like the ChatGPTs, the OpenAIs, and the Anthropics of the world. We don't have to compete in the same space. There is a lot to be done in applying that tool to everyday business. And that is where I think Columbus can really take a leadership role, and it is already doing that. We've got many medical institutions here. They do a lot of research at OSU, Nationwide Children's Hospital. They all are beginning to use AI in the research to find new and better medicine, right, as an example. Financial services organizations like Nationwide, Chase, we're all investing heavily to see how can we leverage generative AI to speed up the decisions that we make, as well as make better, more confident decisions. There are lots of great HBR case studies that have been already written in the financial services space, and we are doubling down on this area. But it doesn't have to be these big companies or big institutions like OSU. There are so many players like startups in the ecosystem. There are lots of different companies like the one that I just mentioned with the founder that I met. So there are lots of really cool things that's happening. But I also want to really shift gears and think about what needs to be there to make AI run. It's the data centers. We've got a lot of them. Many of them are being built here in Columbus, Ohio. To make those data centers run, what do you need? You need power. AEP and others have a big role to play. I mean, power is going to be so much demand. I think you wouldn't even think about electricity companies as being impacted by AI. They're going to have a super growth cycle that I don't think that we have seen in recent decades. And then there are companies like Vertiv, right? They're playing a key role in making these data centers function very effectively. So I think Columbus has got a great future, but it doesn't have to necessarily compete with Silicon Valley.
Excellent. Anyone else want to add on to that? Mike, please?
Yeah, I'll add. I think what makes Columbus interesting is we are built on our Midwest value system. And I think leaders who lead with character and values and work with this AI will win long term. It's not to say Silicon Valley doesn't have a good value system, but if you think about Silicon Valley, a lot of times they're thinking about how can I get to revenue as quickly as possible. I think to Guru's point, we can use AI in different use cases with our established value system we have, our character, and build AI that is more long-term in thinking for the next 30, 40, and 50 years. So I don't want to lose sight about the values we have here in Central Ohio.
Excellent. Very good. Oh, okay. And then also, the fact that our new provost at Ohio State Ravi mentioned that, the commitment to AI, right? Just make sure they all go through Nate's class and they'll be just fine. It'll be good. Okay, this is a really important topic that I'm glad we're going to be able to get to, which is ethics, excess, equity, and governance. And so, Mike, you're gonna take us through this, and it's important because as with any technology, there's always a challenge around who has access, who can leverage it the most effectively. So, what steps can we take to ensure AI doesn't widen existing gaps between racial, geographic, economic disparities? And then is there an ethical boundary in your own industry that concerns you? So talk a little to us about that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a new revolution. We saw the Industrial Revolution, the Internet era. This is a new revolution that we are fortunate enough to be in the middle of. I think with each revolution, you've seen disparities happen. Most recently, in the internet era, it's like, well, who has access to extremely fast speed internet to be able to leverage it appropriately? In my mind, what we're going to see in this new AI era is, okay, who has access to AI literacy to understand how this stuff actually works? And you don't have to be a mathematician, but you have to have the foundational knowledge to understand how the systems work together, how you as a human can prompt it, let the AI do its thing, and then audit it and QA it on the back end. Like, knowing how to do those things really, really well will take folks a long way. But my fear is that if there's certain parts of the community are not invested in with this type of education, you will start to see specific gaps. And it's important that we don't lose sight of it.
Excellent. I know, Nicole, governance is important to you. So would you mind adding on to that as well?
Yeah, I'd love to. So when we talk about governance and we talk about the topic that Mike just addressed, they go hand in hand. And so if you especially for business leaders, as we are deploying AI systems, you will absolutely start hearing things about, like, for example, NIST AI RMF. You'll hear about ISO standards, things like that we know exist. And essentially what they do is give us guardrails based on risk. They give us guardrails based on scenarios that tell us what is and is not appropriate based on our enterprise risk profile. And that matters because one of the foundations to them are actually govern, if you're NIST, or context, if you're ISO. We talk about humans and human in the loop, the people who are making decisions, when they are not enabled with the right AI literacy, when they are not enabled with the right understanding of algorithmic thinking and how the inputs and outputs directly affect one another, when they don't understand, like, the systems impact between the systems and how they communicate, it creates an inherent risk for your organization and for you. And so the reason that matters is because it's not just necessarily about people having access, it's also about us protecting ourselves as organizations to enable the human beings who are using them to do it appropriately. And so the relationship between the human being understanding and the organizations protecting themselves and risk are inextricably, like, you can't tear them apart. They are mutually inclusive of one another. And that's why they're so important to understand hand in hand.
Very good. Okay, we've got time for one more question for the panel as Doug gets organized back there to take questions. So this is related to kind of futures and fears. And so I'd like to hear from all of you, right? So, what's one aspect of AI that keeps you up at night and one that gives you hope? And then also, if we brought this panel back in 5 years, what might be the surprise of how AI has evolved in our region? So take whatever aspect of that you want to. So go ahead. And Guru, go.
So I take a very optimistic view of this, right? So people worry about jobs and impact on jobs and so on. With every technology, there is going to be change, right? So I think Mike shared that the number of jobs that did not exist just 40, 50 years ago that we are all working in now. I was thinking about this, doing some research on this question. I want to take you back 150 years. Around 1877, phonograph has been invented by Thomas Edison. And what was the reaction from musicians? They thought that jobs are completely gone, right? But in reality, this phonograph, which allows you to really record music and play it back, actually created a renaissance and an explosion of music. Because before those kind of tools, only the wealthy could really play music as they're having dinner, because they could have somebody come and do that. Now all of us can do it, everybody in the world, right? So that is the kind of change that we're really talking about here. Generative AI can like internet brought democratized information to everybody. I think generative AI and the AI revolution is going to bring insights and knowledge to everybody. Everybody will have access to it, right? So I take a very positive view. Now, in the case of the example that I shared with the phonograph and the revolution that took place with music, and that has happened again and again with other things as well. For example, when cars were being really rolled out in mass, horse cart industry was not very happy, thought that there will be an impact. But cars allowed us to go further and further compared to what we could do with horses. So I think we don't know what we don't know, how this technology is going to really change the way we live. The one thing so I take a very positive view. I think this is going to be good for the industry, good for the world, good for humanity. One area I do worry is people are lazy. I am too. For example, we take what we read as if it's gospel, right? So before the social media, most people got their news through newspapers where it was curated information. There are certain standards for checking facts. Now, many people are beginning to get their news through social media where some of it is curated, some of it is not, and they think it is true. And what I worry sometimes with things like generative AI is they become answer machine. You ask a question and they give you an answer and you believe that is the answer without doing any more research, right? That could have a negative impact, but I'm very optimistic there as well that there will be some additional evolution will take place that will help us get to better and better information and insights.
Nicole?
Sure. So I am not the glass half full person. I'm neutral. The thing that keeps me up at night is actually aligned to ethics, right? So I really have a concern about whether or not people understand what the inputs are and the necessary data and things like that to help them make decisions, just because we've never really asked anyone to think like that before, unless you weren't one of the teams that did it. So that's a huge concern. I think on the hopeful side, though, we actually see in the nonprofit space and in other organizations with the emergence of ethical bodies, we see the complete opposite, actually. We see people coming together that are multidisciplinary, having meaningful conversations about this and helping to scale and build what those standards look like. So that's, I think, a big hope. I think that organizations are adopting that. And if you ask me about 5 years from now, I think the transformation is going to be something very different. I think the winners are the who, not the what. I don't think it's going to be big bang effect. I think it's going to be in ubiquitous access to quite a bit of these solutions that transform the day-to-day operations that are really painful for people.
Nate?
So, and the thing I'm most excited about is when we figure out how to actually use AI for basic science, so obviously something very close to our heart at OSU. But if we get this right, we will be able to dramatically accelerate the pace of our discoveries in medicine, materials engineering, just accomplish some really incredible, life-changing things. When it comes to fears, I'll elaborate on Nicole's point about how roles change. So one of the things we want to do at OSU is to make our students very, very literate and comfortable with AI. So one thing I've taken to do is when I get asked a question, I will actually respond with, here's how you could figure this out. Here's an example of a prompt that you could use to figure this out with AI. To Mike's point about this is to help them become sophisticated users of the technology. And that feels really strange to me because for the vast majority of my role, my job was to answer the question, and a lot of the value that I placed on my position was in knowing the answer to the question. And I think all of us that work in whatever role you work in, you will face some similar version of that where there will be some kind of uncomfortable transition that happens for your role.
Yeah, I'm 95% optimistic, and then there's 5 or 10% of me that has a few fears. I think I'll start with the fear. The one use case I think about a lot is national defense. And what we're going to see, and we're starting to see it already, is AI as a software come into physical products. And so if you're following the White House right now and David Sachs, the AI czar that's been announced, what we're seeing across the United States are each state is creating legislations. That'll slow things down significantly. And what he's trying to do is say, okay, how do we have a national standard for AI so we can move fast, not have all these barriers with contracting and things like that. So national defense use cases would be my fear. but I'm also extraordinarily optimistic about the future. I think one thing 5 years from now that I think is incredibly cool is imagine a world where you have a co-pilot assistant in AI, and it could really optimize all areas of your life: health, wealth, fitness, family, friends, and it can give you on-demand precision on exactly what you should do to optimize that specific part of your life that you want to. And it will be here. Like, in 5 years, like, how cool is that we will be able to leverage this technology to live longer, healthier lives? That's what I'm passionate about.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you, panelists. Don't go anywhere. It's CMC's long-standing tradition to take audience questions. We'll move to the questions from our live stream and in-person audience in a few minutes. If you have a question, please make your way to the microphone now. We would appreciate that. And if you're joining us on YouTube, please type in your questions into the chat. Before we take audience questions, I have one more question for my panelists, just very briefly. If you were to, what is one of the weirdest, and these are quick answers, one of the weirdest or funniest things you've done utilizing an AI tool? Why, Guru, you're always first. Fire away, go ahead.
I asked ChatGPT, because I do a lot of research with it, act as a CIA agent and create a profile of Guru. It was fascinating to see what it actually did. Try that.
That's awesome. Nicole.
I have an agentic tool. It's called Rabbit IQ. It's really cool. And I actually used it to take pictures to better plan my garden because of all the rain this year. So they were dying, and I decided to figure out a better way to plant, and it actually worked, and it helped me with defense against rabbits and deer. So very cool tool.
There you go.
So I leave I change what model it is, but I leave the different video and voice models open during parts of my class so it can participate in the discussion, just so people can play around with that. And someone in my class asked it to roast us, and it went harder than I expected in a classroom environment.
That's great. All right, top that one, Mike. Go ahead.
I cannot. My youngest daughter has a very specific nighttime story. She likes spooky but sweet stories. So I started this chat on ChatGPT like 2 years ago, and this thing has evolved into like the craziest, like insane stories for her every single night. And it's kind of been fun to see like this 2-year story to where it's at now. But that's kind of a silly one that we do that's helpful for us.
All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Doug. Before I do that, though, I want to tell mine, and that is that I use I use ChatGPT, other tools as well, to figure out who's going to win the national championship again this year for football. And then actually, when I asked that question, it said, we can't answer that question. You need to go to a betting source to be able to find that answer. Anyway, all right, so Doug, what's your first question?
John, thank you. And I wouldn't put money on that answer, or maybe you should. I don't know. Just test it out. Thank you so much, John. Thank you to today's panelists. A great conversation. If you have a question for today's panelists, please do join us here. We'll try to get to as many as we can. If you're typing or if you're watching online, please type your question in the chat. We'll try to get to those too. Please do keep your questions very short today so we can get to as many as possible. And questions always end in what punctuation mark? They end in a question mark. Yes, they do. I'm going to launch us off with this one. Gregor Gilliam, owner and editorial director of Versatile Words. He asks, last week, the Wall Street Journal described how AI is wrecking an already fragile job market for college graduates. And you touched on this a little bit, but what is your advice for college students or high school students who might struggle to find meaningful jobs after graduation? Maybe an answer might have to do with some of the prompting skills that you talked about.
Nicole, go ahead.
So I would say that exactly what you just said, prompt literacy is a big deal. But again, I really do think that the students of tomorrow coming into the workforce today need to have a better understanding of the industries that they are trying to operate in. And they need to look for, using these tools, ways to leverage their differentiation. So this is what you have a degree in, this is what you're interested in, what's the domain, and more importantly, like how can you use prompting to help you understand where some of the gaps are so you make yourself marketable in that space.
And I might take a different lens of that one, where I think folks who can collaborate across a large cross-functional business in person and have those facilitation skills will be the differentiator. I think knowledge will become a commodity. Prompting is important, but the emotional intelligence, skill sets, I think will be ever more important as we progress on this journey.
Hi, Jerry Rampelt. My question is a comparison or contrast to Gutenberg inventing movable type that caused an explosion of learning followed by over a century of religious wars in Europe.
I think the question was on the potential long-term historical impact of AI? Sure, unintended consequences.
Okay. Go ahead, Nicole.
So when we consider unintended consequences, we're looking at the things we just talked about, the lack of equity, the lack of access. I think we should also be thinking more intentionally about what's appropriate for an AI system to do versus not do. So when we think about system harm, when we think about social harm, if we look at it from that context, I think those are things that there are definitely bodies that are thinking through that, but there are not always operators that are thinking that way. And that's the collision course that we're on with governance. And that's why it's so critical to understand appropriateness and all the ethical boundaries that we need to ensure exist in ways that we didn't before.
Yeah, if I may add, I would say nefarious individuals, right, that are going to use, I mean, a lot of the examples we gave are all positive aspects of using AI. There's just as many negative aspects to use it, to figure out things about your, people you don't like or things you don't want. So there's a lot of unintended consequences. That's why I think the governance is a really important aspect to that and what the panel was talking about. Anybody else? Go ahead, Guru.
Couple of things, right? You can actually now create what looks real completely made up, right? So what is real, what is fake? How do you identify it with like videos and text? Did Guru really say this, Those kind of things, it's gonna be a challenge as an industry we have to figure out. The other one that long term, I really hope that we continue to have multiple AI engines out there, and then they all compete for one another for better and better. That is the best solution. Otherwise, I do worry about what I shared earlier, which is it becoming the answer machine and becoming the Ministry of Truth from 1984. And that would be not a good outcome. But I don't think that will happen if there is multiple models out there and people can go check multiple places to really get their better and better answers.
Thank you. John Cairns with the live stream audience asks, what measures do you think should be taken to mitigate the environmental impact as this technology and its needs grow?
The thing is actually the power consumption. It is, like if you really look at the projections, I mean, sometimes I even cringe before I type a prompt into ChatGPT. Apparently, sometimes people build a very good relationship with these tools, and they say thanks. And just saying thanks, it has to go process it. There was a great article in Wall Street Journal about it, and it costs millions and millions of, tens of millions of dollars for these companies, but more importantly, more power. I think the push towards nuclear is actually a good way to really mitigate this. I don't think we can actually satisfy the demand that we are going to see without really embracing nuclear in a very safe way.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of add on there. So a lot of the frameworks that we see today actually do incorporate environmental impacts. A big one is the EU AI Act. That's a massive one. Canada has one that's similar. And in the US, we see it referenced specifically in a lot of our governance frameworks like NIST, AI, RMF. I think a big part of this to ensure that we're considering environmental factors is actually the scenarios by which we deploy the solution. So leaders will need to really think meaningfully about whether or not this solution even requires AI and the pressures they're creating. And you'll see a lot more of this sort of emerge. I definitely think because of energy pressures and because of competition and because of all these other things, you're going to see quite a bit of pressure in how we're using it and if it's even fit for purpose.
Excellent. Hi, my name's Jonathan. Thank you guys for doing this today. I just wanted to ask, I'm a writer, and from the lens of a writing standpoint, I used to say, it seems like this seems odd. This AI output in the chatbot seems odd. It doesn't feel authentic. The humanity isn't there. But as the technology gets better and better, I get afraid because it seems like it's getting stronger and stronger. So I guess my question is I'm asking for advice because you guys know this the best. How can we as writers, as people who offer that as a consultancy, ensure that we're still offering something to partners, et cetera?
Yeah, okay. So a big part of your differentiation will be in your context. And so AI does a good job in making general assumptions, and I'm not saying it's not good at personalization, but I think that where we see a lot of the creative side, the impact, is based on your context and your deep understanding of the needs of your audiences. And AI can do some of that, but it'll never do it quite as well. And so I think that if you focus on that, if you focus on how you understand your audiences and the emotion behind it, their goals and their needs, that's where you'll see the separation between yourself and AI.
Spot on.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. Well, go ahead, Mike.
Can you hear me? Okay. So John, I'll add there. I think if you work for a consultancy, you can use it as a competitive advantage by offering things like A/B testing with your own voice. What makes you unique is your voice in writing, right? But which voice is going to resonate with this specific target audience? And I think, it has a selling point or a value proposition. Like we do A/B testing, and we make sure that it's going to really resonate with this particular target audience. I think you can frame it in a way that's super valuable.
Hi, my name is Tony Bell, Phoenix Consulting and CMC board member. At Harvard, one of my classmates is a programmer for deep learning, and his warning to me and our cohort was that you don't use AI for things that you don't know on your own really, really well. So with that in mind, and to go with our writer's question, how do you see young people, right? We've got this next generation coming up that know how to use AI and ChatGPT quite well. ChatGPT has a tendency to hallucinate and give us incorrect information. And so these young people that are using it as a tool, how, and maybe this is for you, Nathan, but all of you, how do you see us working with young people to really know the material, right? Know how to write on their own, and to be able to use those AI tools as a tool, as an aid, instead of as the crutch?
So this might be the biggest challenge that we're facing right now in education. And I think, to be very honest with you, I think right now we're in provisional solutions. I think we're in sort of the between times of finding what's our new way of doing it, to be very honest. What I've done in a lot of my classes is to shift focus to oral and in-person examination, and I think this actually dovetails with what Mike is saying in terms of amplifying those skills. But if you haven't put the time into learning the material, it's very, very easy to tell that in person, obviously. The second big challenge we have is, and this goes back to the question about writing, AI breaks the link between writing and thought. And what I mean by that is you can give an output that looks like it's the output of a human thought process that's well written and so on. But the thought actually wasn't put into it. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges we have in education, because writing is so important for thinking, whether you're just doing a little bit of reflective writing, whatever it is. And we need to do our best to make sure that we don't lose that while also teaching the new tools. So I think we have provisional solutions, much more in-person, much more oral discussion of material. I don't think we've found the long-term solution yet, to be very honest.
So if I may add, it's probably it goes back to the long-term implication. I do worry about this as one of the negatives, that if our next generation doesn't really learn to critically think, write, argue, that's bad for humanity. And I think Nate really summarized it well, that distinction between thought and output, right? So one of the professors I was talking with just over dinner, he shared that maybe like the technique that he's taking is, you can use it as an aid, just like we all use calculator as an aid, and we don't think twice about using a calculator. However, you still need to understand math of addition, subtraction, calculus, or whatever, right? So he's like, I'm really requiring people to do a pencil and paper type of a test. That really is forcing people to really learn rather than fake the answers, right? So I really hope that that happens. Otherwise, how do you, if you really don't have the understanding, how do you then combine it with other things, bring the context, and then create new novel ideas? That's really hard. You cannot just keep on asking ChatGPT.
I think we're going to wrap up the question period, and I'm going to turn it over to Sophia. So thank you.
All right, I hope everyone found today's conversation enlightening. I know that I did. I have the opportunity to teach a class on civil society at OSU, and I couldn't agree more that the importance of in-person conversation and dialogue is so important to our students, but also really important to the Columbus Metropolitan Club's mission. So I hope that you have in-person conversations here, but then you share the message of what you learned today with your peers at work, in your neighborhoods, in your own classrooms, and with your kids on how we can start to utilize AI in our everyday lives and in our businesses. I want to thank today's sponsors, The Ohio State University and Improving, for sponsoring today's conversation. Also, I'd like to thank the presenting sponsor, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partners with the Columbus Dispatch, and most importantly, the Ellis, for giving us a space to convene and connect. And then, most importantly, I'd like to thank today's panelists, Mike Cohn, Nathan Craig, Nicole Jackson, Guru Vasudeya, and John Huruvosky. Hopefully I got that name right. Thank you so much for presenting and to giving us a wonderful opportunity to learn a little bit more about AI. Let's give them a round of applause. So I noticed that several people raised their hands and said this was your first CMC event. One, thank you so much for participating in person, and for those who are tuning in online, thank you for joining us. But we do this every single week. So I would like to take a moment to invite you to come back here at the Ellis, the next wave, the new leaders shaping Ohio politics. We intentionally wanted to create a space to talk about new ideas in both the Republican and Democratic parties. So please join us for another conversation right here Wednesday at noon, and thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great one.